In 1996, everybody waited with bated breath to see the new Jim Carrey film, The Cable Guy. Just 2 years prior, in 1994, Carrey had exploded onto the global entertainment stage and shot to megastardom with 3 smash hit comedies, all within that 1 year. We're talking Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. He followed those up in 1995 with Batman Forever, playing the campy Riddler, and then Ace Ventura sequel, When Nature Calls. Carrey had firmly established himself as the comedic performer of the 90s. So when The Cable Guy opened in theaters in 1996, audiences were shocked to encounter a film with much darker themes. The almost thriller-like portrait of an obsessed loner manipulating the life of his new friend unsettled audiences who just wanted to see more of the same light entertainment from their rubber-faced goofball. I always liked The Cable Guy, and I was always confused as to why it was not received well by critics or audiences on its initial release. I watched it again recently, and its themes are more prescient than ever, having predicted our ever-increasing digitally connected lives. So John and I want to explore The Cable Guy today and encourage you all to watch it again with fresh eyes. So settle in, lay back in that giant satellite dish as the rain pours down on you, and ride the information superhighway with us and rediscover The Cable Guy. And who knows, maybe you'll finally understand why somebody would challenge a friend to a game of Mortal Kombat in Vietnam.
Beautiful. Love
What
that
did you think
intro.
of that,
Thank
John?
you. Yeah, great. It's I always feel slightly defeated when you do a really good intro, because I'm like, yeah, that's as good as the app's going to get.
That's the show.
Yeah,
Close
that's
it
the
out.
show.
End
That's the show.
the podcast. You go.
Yeah.
Thanks for over 200 episodes, guys. And
We did it.
This is the
Just
end.
going to be intros from now on, and you can
This-
extrapolate yourselves what the episode would have been about. So yeah, I think you put this on the radar, didn't you? The Cable Guy. I mean, it's something that is always kind of we often make reference to it. I think
Very often we quote it, you and me.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam.
That's the one.
That's the main quote that we talk about. And we had an episode way back when my brother Dan reminded me, called The Cable Guy Delusion, because one of the things we talked about was the Truman Show delusion that sort of comes up for, people who are at emergency departments in mental health hospitals and things like that. Where
Right.
people think they're in the Truman Show. And I think we must have made some joke about people thinking they were in the Cable Guy. And and so it's kind of, and it's sort of it's a fish out of water culturally. It's a sort of strange blip in the careers of some of the people who are involved.
Yeah.
And its reception is kind of a puzzle as well. And I mean, I agree with you. I want to make the case on this week's episode for it being a pretty remarkable film in some ways, and one that perhaps was ahead of its time, but also that we can look back on as an artifact of its time, which has kind of gained value with the passing of the years. And so maybe I'll give you a bit of a sense of what it's about.
Please.
At a basic level, how it was received, and then talk about some of the people involved, which include, of course, Jim Carrey, but also people like Matthew Broderick, Ben Stiller, and everyone's favorite softball buddy comedy goofball Judd Apatow.
Yeah.
And for many of them and the people in it, it was a kind of an interesting milestone in their early careers. So what's it about? Well, as you've alluded to, it's about it's a buddy comedy that sort of verges on madcap comedy and thriller, and is a sort of genre bender in that sense. I was going to say gender bender. I don't think that's a fair description. But so Stephen Kovacs, who's played by Matthew Broderick, of Sarah Jessica Parker's husband fame, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And this is a kind of a new role for him, because he plays in this movie a sort of slightly uptight, slightly miserable, kind of straight man. And like most male protagonists in movies from that time, he's an architect. And I've always been interested in that trope because it seems to me architecture is kind of, it's just a role that lends itself to being a protagonist in a movie because it's sort of creative but also sort of practical and profitable. So you can sort of be that everyman. And he has split up with his girlfriend, Robin, who's played by Leslie Mann.
Yep.
An interesting side note, which maybe we'll come back to, but Leslie Mann met Judd Apatow on the
I was
in
going
her
to
audition.
say, was this their first encounter?
It was, and now I think that now they're married with 2 children. One of their children is making her film debut, as I understand it. But Leslie met Judd in the audition, and like all good producers, he bedded her soon after that. And so
A rich Hollywood tradition.
exactly, the old casting couch. And so Stephen Kovacs moves into an apartment, splits up with Robin, and he has these problems with his cable. So he calls the cable guy, and this guy, who we later learn is named Chip, comes over and fixes the cable, and kind of is a very eccentric, very kind of Carrey-esque performer from the get-go. Bit of a loser, a bit kind of over familiar and awkward, but also very very kind of over the top in the way that Jim Carrey's characters of that era definitely are.
Yeah.
And quite sort of intrusive and cloying, and kind of basically forces himself into Stephen's life. And over time, in the tradition of that kind of movie, like a kind of, there's lots of them. It's like a kind of not indecent proposal, Fatal Attraction sort of vibe, where you start off liking someone and then you decide, actually, I don't want you in my life anymore, and they go mad and ruin your life. It's that sort of stalker vibe. And it had a pretty divisive reception, as you've alluded to. It made grossed about $102 million around the world, which doesn't sound too bad against a $47 million budget. But I don't think that takes into account some of the advertising and other costs. So some of the stuff I was reading said that if you actually kind of looked at it, it probably made a much more modest profit than that would have implied. But still a profit, and yet it's remembered as a kind of flop. It's was nominated by the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, which I think is the kind of predecessor to the Raspberry, as the most painfully unfunny comedy. It's split Siskel and Ebert. I think Siskel liked it, Ebert hated it, said it was one of the worst movies of the year. And Ben Stiller remembers it as a kind of in typical sort of slightly Hollywoodish trying to put a positive spin on something. He talks about it as the most educational and spirit building failure of his career. But Jim Carrey looks back fondly on it, as I think Judd does. Jim was asked about his favorite films from his career when he was doing press for Sonic the Hedgehog, and I don't think Sonic made that list, but it's probably one of the biggest paydays of his career, but perhaps not artistically at the top of the pile. But he says, I have odd favourites that may not be for kids, obviously in the context of being in a movie which very much is for kids, Sonic the Hedgehog. But The Cable Guy is one of my favourite movies. He says, I think Ben Stiller did an amazing job, and it's populated with the greatest comedy actors of our day.
Yeah.
When they were just coming into their power. I love that character he's talking about of Chip. That character is all of us. We were all raised by TV. And I think that quote kind of captures what I like about the film and what I think is kind of important about the film, namely that it does capture this moment culturally where it's talking about TV, it's kind of homage to TV, it's addressing a generation, probably more than anything, it's addressing Generation X, who can relate to that experience of being raised by TV, which is an interesting thing to reflect on now as we kind of change, as TV kind of changes forms, entertainment changes forms. But also it captures an interesting moment in Hollywood where you have all these people who are coming off the Ben Stiller, actually coming out of the Ben Stiller show, which is a short-lived project, but also kind of part of that 90s LA comedic circuit that includes Judd Apatow, who did a bit of stand-up back then, but includes lots of other big names that we might come back to. But people like Janine Garofalo's in it. David Cross makes an appearance in it. Andy Dick is the sort of head honcho at the Medieval Times restaurant.
Yeah.
Bob Odenkirk's in it. Jack Black, who was then pretty well at the beginning of his career, is in it, as well as Kyle, his offsider from Tenacious D, who makes an appearance at the end. Owen Wilson is in it, who had only ever been in Bottle Rocket, I think, and Judd and some of the others said they saw him in Bottle Rocket, which is a great film, and they loved him immediately and asked him to be in it. But it's kind of before his, he became a kind of memed character actor who plays the same character in every movie. And who else? Kathy Griffin, who's a bit of a 90s comedic figure. George Siegel, who I think was in Just Shoot Me. So it's like a real who's who of like 90s comedy, and that sort of, key members of people who then went on to become part of the so-called
it's people that went on to be huge.
Pack. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, people who, when I would have seen this film for the first time, I think maybe I would have looked at Jack Black and maybe I would have said, because I have quite a good eye for recognizing people, maybe I would have said, hey, isn't that the class clown from rollerblading teen film Airborne? And somebody would have turned to me in the theater and said, what the fuck are you talking about? And I said, you haven't seen Airborne? You got to watch Airborne. It's got that guy in it.
Yeah. You said maybe you're not ready for Airborne yet, but your kids are going to love it.
Fuck. We should do a whole episode on Airborne. It's so good. But I think everyone else in this film at this point, I would not have known who they were. I would not have seen them in anything else, because we didn't get the kind of David Cross, Bob Odenkirk, because they were in a show called the Mr. Show, which I think would probably have been around this. I think it was called the Mr. Show. Okay, and it was David Cross and Bob Odenkirk, which I'm thinking was around this era. Time.
Yeah,
and did you see this at the cinema?
I reckon I might have, actually. Yeah, and that's the funny thing, is I think that probably accounts for part of the lukewarm to hostile reaction, is people, as you alluded to in your introduction, were going to it because they were like, it's the new Jim Carrey film. And all these people who were like, oh yeah, it's going to be just like Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. So you had people of our age, I mean, we were about 13, going to see this movie that was tonally just radically different from any of those things. Even though Jim is kind of up to his old tricks, it's really quite dark. And apparently some of the later scripts that got sort of pulled back by the studio were even darker, but what ends up on the screen is quite dark. And so I think I did. I certainly have a memory of watching it kind of at the time of its release or around that time.
I saw it at the Piccadilly Cinema on O'Connell Street. Okay. I can't believe I remember this. I saw it at the Piccadilly Cinema on O'Connell Street with my then friend Martin. We went to it together.
Shout out to Martin Ferranda, friend of the show.
Yeah, shout out to Martin Ferranda, friend of the show. And I think that I sort of quite enjoyed it and was just like, that was cool. And I think I had gone into it with a strange expectation because I'd heard people say that it was really bad. But I think strangely, just the reason that people thought that was because of the expectation that it was going to be. It says a lot about establishing expectations for films and things like that. And apparently, and this makes sense, apparently there was a huge marketing mismatch where there was a decision made by the studio to market it as another wacky Jim Carrey comedy.
Yeah,
so you were watching trailers, and I kind of remember this. You were watching trailers that were going, "You loved him in Ace Ventura and The Mask, and now Jim Carrey is with Matthew Broderick from Ferris Bueller's Day Off
Right.
in the craziest comedy of the year." And then so you're going into it thinking that it's going to be that.
He's going to be climbing out of a rhino's butt again.
He's going to be going
jokes.
I think he's trying to communicate. Aruga! Somebody stop me. He's installing the cable going, somebody stop me. And so suddenly when it was dark, I mean, it's lit dark, like it's very kind of noir. It's rainy. It's dark. The colors are all sort of muted. It's nothing like dancing at the Coco Bongo.
No, it's definitely not like that. Exactly. And that's right. I read about that because obviously they were a bit cagey about the tonal shift, I think, and weren't sure it was going to play well. But rather than just embracing what it was, they kind of, probably commercially that was a good decision because people had already bought a ticket by the time they realized that it wasn't tonally what they were expecting. But then the reviews were kind of a bit of a pushback because people thought this isn't the Jim Carrey that we've come to know and love. And I think Roger Ebert was like, people really want to like Jim Carrey, and this is kind of an icky,
that's the other thing, isn't it?
Kind of nauseating character.
He wasn't an easy character to like. I actually kind of I did like him by the end because he was a tragic character, and you realize at the end that he was this latchkey kid whose mother. There's a scene because I watched the whole thing again a couple of weeks ago, and there's a scene at the end. I think it is, or maybe
morning actually.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, Sunday morning. Sint and Ines went for a long walk, and I just sat at home watching Cable Guy.
That's great. Did you enjoy it? Like, it's such a little window into that period in time.
One of the things we talked about is how nice it is to watch movies from that era, and I did enjoy it in that respect too. But also, I didn't do a kind of cast check before I watched it, and I kept going back and going, fuck, is that like David Cross? I mean, he doesn't even have any lines. He's just in it.
No, he's just in the background of The Office.
Yeah, and Bob Odenkirk is kind of similar. I think he has like, sort of he's
Matthew Broderick's like either a brother or a brother-in-law or something.
Exactly, and they're playing like a kind of adult
porno password.
Game. Porno password. That's right, and it's kind of classic. Tonally, it's really a lot like Ben Stiller and Judd Apatow's later films because it's this kind of thing which is very Meet the Parents of someone being put in this really uncomfortable position. Everyone in that situation with them is going like, don't be such a prude and just chill out.
Yeah.
And they're going, actually, I don't want to chill out. This is fucked. And then everyone's like, and they're like, you don't know this person. He's a dick. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? You're the dick. And it's just kind of it's a real trope from those movies. And it's a great scene with a young Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah.
And they were all young. I mean, Judd apparently who produced it, Judd Apatow. He tried briefly to be the director, and they said no, that job's going to Ben Stiller, who just directed.
Sorry, you were going to say it. I didn't realize this until this morning.
Yeah, nor did I. I knew he was in Reality Bites, but I didn't know he'd just directed that movie, and that was his directorial debut. So another movie that I think very much about Gen Xers, and Judd was only 29, I think, when he produced it. So they were really at the beginning of things.
And it is, I loved it because it's more. I mean, I would much rather watch the Cable Guy than Ace Ventura or Dumb and Dumber or The Mask. Like I know exactly that I'm going to be, pretty unstimulated mentally by his 1994 work. But again, just as a little aside, fucking hell, I've seen this mentioned on the internet several times when pointing to the downfall of contemporary cinema and just how shit movies are now. And people say, do you know what Jim Carrey did in 1994? He did Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. All came out. I mean, I'm sure they were shot in 93, some of them, but they all came out in one calendar year. Like, that is fucking bananas. They are all cultural staples.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about Cameron Diaz in the Coco Bongo, of all things.
Exactly. I mean, those are movies that obviously are the foundation of Jim Carrey's career even now. If somebody said, name your 3 favorite Jim Carrey movies, a lot of people would name those 3. And it's weird because one of the things I wanted to talk about, we can move to this at any time, but is the fact that Jim Carrey, this really marks a kind of point of rise to fame that is unprecedented in some respects in Hollywood. And in the sense that his upfront salary for this film, so not including like back end deals where you get a section of the profits from, I don't know, putting it on cable or putting it on DVD or in those days VHS, but his upfront salary was $20 million.
Yeah.
And nobody had ever earned that much money as an upfront salary for a film up until that point. He was the first actor to ever make $20 million up front for a film. And that was a kind of a meteoric rise. You know, when he first made, when he made the first Ace Ventura, he got something like $450,000. Then by the time he makes Dumb and Dumber, he made $7 million. So obviously by that time, even though it was within the same calendar year, people were like, this guy's a smash hit already. And then they upped it to $20 million. So almost half the budget of the entire film was just his salary. And there's kind of interesting interviews with Apatow and Broderick about that, which are much more recent. You know, so about 10 years ago, Broderick was saying he actually felt quite sympathetic when they were filming because he knew that Carrey had gone from relatively unknown to being this incredibly highly paid actor in, 24 months. And everyone was kind of saying he was a genius and saying he was, this kind of hot new thing. And so he felt like sympathetic to the pressure that he must have put him on himself and been under, which would have been insane. I mean, like you would have felt like I'm suddenly this huge juggernaut and I've got to keep it going. To his credit, I think his performance in Cable Guy is pretty amazing and pretty tonally different, as we've said, from anything he'd done up to that point. But it was a big thing in the Hollywood sort of inner circle, the sort of inside baseball press of Variety and Hollywood Press or whatever, that he was making this much, because this was in an era where it was much clearer what Hollywood stars were making for films. I think it's subsequently become, firstly, less publicized and more deliberately obscured, but also more complicated because people do much more back-end deals now because things get streamed and they get put on various platforms or whatever. So the upfront salary matters less. But in those days, I mean, articles that I read talked about it as this period in film history where it was almost like these were kind of star athletes and you would hear about them making, 15 million or 10 million for a movie as this kind of mark of how great they were. And the studios were very open about that because it was a kind of way of creating buzz.
Right.
But, nobody had earned 20. So in the sort of lead up, you started to see this capitulation. There was a sort of informal studio rule that you didn't pay anyone more than 15 million, and then people started to creep above that. So you got Arnold Schwarzenegger apparently got 17 million for Eraser, which I don't even remember. You got 17.5 million for Sylvester Stallone making Daylight, which again I don't really remember at all. And then suddenly you get up to the 20 million mark for Jim Carrey. So it's a huge coup for him. And I think that kind of set him up to fail because people were like, fuck, this movie better be good. Or it made it easy for them to say, this isn't good because they didn't get value for money, or because they spent too much of the film's budget on paying Jim Carrey and they didn't have enough money for, figuring out the actual film.
Figuring out the actual angle of the marketing.
Yeah.
It marks also Jim Carrey's first. I mean, it's funny because it's not a 100% serious role. It's not like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where he is playing a serious character. He is not trying to be a goofball, funny guy. In fact, in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it's kind of the ordinary plainness of his character that's so vital to that role, because Kate Winslet is kind of the sort of wacky, emotional, crazy emo girl, and he's the kind of shy, reserved one, and then that kind of, there's like a friction in their relationship. And then you've got a kind of somewhat, again, much more serious, but obviously, but before, a few years before Eternal Sunshine, you've got The Truman Show. So he was already like establishing, the Cable Guy kind of establishes him a little bit outside of his rubber-faced, because he was really rubber-faced. I mean, that was the thing, wasn't it? He was a real rubber-faced goofball.
I saw one review of the time which called him a rubber-faced flatulist, which was a nice phrase to describe his kind of vibe in the early 90s.
Well, maybe we can go through some of the themes here, John, that are prescient today. We're talking about prescient. We're talking about parasocial relationships and loneliness, because Chip, he's obsessed with TV and he's used it to shape his identity. He's a latchkey kid. He doesn't have any real friends, and then he becomes. I'm trying to remember now. Maybe you remember this because you've seen it more recently, and this is perhaps it's not. Maybe this is an unnecessary detail that we don't really need to dive into. But I just, as soon as you said it, I was like, "Fuck! How does that work in script again?" When Matthew Broderick's cable fails and he calls the cable company, how does Chip intercept the call? Because he's not a real cable guy. Is he? He's like, Matthew Broderick's cable fails.
Yeah.
I was like, how? I mean, I'm sure we can tie this up quite. Maybe I can just ask ChatGPT really quickly, because as soon as you said that, I was just like, wait, how is it that he's not a real cable guy? But then.
I don't think that is explained, as my memory.
I'm going to say, in the cable guy, how is it that Matthew Broderick's cable breaks, he calls the company and Jim Carrey responds because Jim Carrey does not work for the cable company.
Yeah.
Although he did previously, remember when Jack Black, who plays the best friend of Matthew Broderick, when Jack Black does a little bit of deep diving because he doesn't get a good feeling about Chip, he thinks he's pretending to be somebody he's not. Jack Black realizes that he would work for and then get fired from cable companies for being too familiar and obsessive and weird with the customers.
Stalking the customers. And in fact, there's a few unanswered questions which are deliberately left unanswered, so you never find out what his real name is because he declines to answer that and just gives his name because he's such a sort of TV-addled nut.
That's right. This is from... Sorry, John, go on.
He just describes, he says, my name is, I don't know, Ricky Ricardo or like George Jetson or whatever it is. And so you never find that out. He has a cable company truck, but it's kind of implied maybe he just stole that truck.
So it says here... Jim Carrey's character Chip is not an official cable company employee. He's a loner and manipulator who sneaks into people's lives. He still does have access to the cable company's systems, uniforms, and equipment. The movie hints that he knows the real technicians and he might have stolen or forged credentials. So it's suggested that he still had access from his previous employment at the cable company. He perhaps still had access to the systems. So when Matthew Broderick calls, he intercepts and says, "Oh, I'll take that job."
Yeah, I wonder if that's right. I wonder if it's kind of never explained because it didn't survive the sort of, the various cuts that they made throughout it. Because apparently they started off with the script, which came from this guy, Lou Holtz Jr., and he says he basically got the idea because he was visiting his mum and it was late at night. And he saw a cable guy wandering around the halls of this apartment building. And he was like, why the fuck is this guy here so late? And he sort of had this character in his head of like a stalker cable guy. And then he somehow, even though it was the first script that he'd written, he'd previously been a lawyer, and he never wrote a script again, as I've read.
Wow.
But he started this bidding war and ended up getting the script sold for $1 million. But then once it got into Judd Apatow's hands, Judd rewrote it several times, as did Jim Carrey, because he was, you know, this kind of heavyweight with all these ideas. So all of the kind of physical comedy, which is still very much a part of the film, is Jim's sort of influence on the script. And Apatow's influence on the script is about basically making it darker and darker. And he said at the time, I was a kind of an angry, lonely man myself, and I kind of related to that aspect of it and to this kind of TV, you know, latchkey kid thing.
Yeah.
But they had to sort of keep pulling back because there were scenes where in the original where he's like trying to drill into Matthew Broderick's head with a drill and stuff. And apparently there's a scene where he like injures Matthew Broderick and then stitches him up and the stitches form like a TV. And the studio was like, this is getting too weird and people are not going to watch it. And so they had to, so maybe they've just left that as a loose end, how he actually gets to know that he wants this job done at first. And when you first see him, it's very much like, it's classic Jim Carrey. He's kind of walking in this very sort of exaggerated way and sort of being ridiculous and hammy. But then he forms a slightly, I mean, he's like that through the whole movie to a degree, but what's different maybe from The Mask or Ace Ventura is like the way that the rest of the movie is very real world and the way people are reacting to him is very real world. And so everyone's like, this guy's fucking awkward as hell and it's like saying all the wrong things. And there's a scene where he joins Matthew Broderick at a kind of friendly basketball match and just like goes
That's a
mental
great
and
scene.
smashes the ring. It's really funny. And like climbs up, straddles Jack Black to get up to the ring and just like does a dunk and smashes the ring. And everyone's like, the fuck, who is this guy?
Who is this guy that you brought?
Yeah.
There's so many scenes from it that are memorable, and there's so many that you and I quote to each other all the time to just sort of reference different things that are the one that we use all the time is playing Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam, which maybe I can just actually read that scene, the full thing. So what he would do, one of the things that Chip would do, and you realize by the end of the film, because he takes essentially kidnaps Leslie Mann's character and gives her the same speech that he's given earlier, the exact same speech that he's given earlier in the movie to Matthew Broderick. And it's very clever because you realize, this is a crazy person who is just taking every fake friend that he's manipulated and eventually tricks to come out to the satellite dish where the cable is sent out from, as this kind of like, this is a fun thing to do. We go out to the satellite dish. And you realize this speech that he gave to Matthew Broderick, which at the start of the film you thought was off the cuff, and then you realize when he gives the exact same speech to Leslie Mann that he's just some crazy manipulator who's giving the exact same speech. Yeah. And it's great. And it's so foreshadowing as well, because it sort of predicts our media saturation landscape that we live in now. The other interesting thing, John, that we haven't really mentioned is this comes out in 96, and it does reference online technology. So it is very TV focused, because obviously he's a cable guy, and it references like the 24-hour cable ecosystem that's just saturating everyone's brain all the time. But then he says this thing about playing Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam. He talks about shopping, the information superhighway.
I've got the quote here if you want it.
Yeah, if you could read it.
So he says, this is the kind of stalker speech. He says, the future is now. Soon every American home will integrate their television, phone, and computer. You'll be able to visit the Louvre on one channel or watch female wrestling on another. You can do your shopping at home or play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam. There's no end to the possibilities. And I read this interview with Judd Apatow where he said, and also the idea, especially in 1995 when we shot it, you did feel like the internet was just starting up and that everything was about to change and get crazy. So there are these monologues from Jim where he's saying one day we're going to combine your television, telephone and computer and you're going to be able to play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam, and he laughs apparently at that point. And at the time, that was kind of a joke, but not today. There are people doing that right now. And he also says, and the O.J. Simpson trial had happened the year before, and we were all somewhat obsessed with O.J. and the Menendez trial with those brothers who've recently also been in the news. So there was a lot of true crime on television and violence as entertainment. The country was really obsessed with watching the trial, and they were so popular that they stopped allowing people to broadcast them. Then he talks about how he watched too much TV, but as a kid himself. But yeah, so that was obviously very kind of, I mean, one of the things I think it's in retrospect quite culturally interesting about it is that it's a homage to this idea of a generation growing up being raised by television, but then this nod to that might sort of take a new form, which of course it has, because it was right at that mid-90s cusp where people were starting to get in the online on the information. I mean, even the use of the phrase "information superhighway" is so of
good.
its time. Nobody says that anymore, but it was the kind of early way of talking about the internet. So yeah, it's interesting that Judd looks back at it as I do, as this marker between two different eras.
We use playing Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam basically any time that there's any major technological advance. That's something like ChatGPT, and then we'll just use, oh wow, I guess they're playing. Is it gonna? You'll send me something like I would send you something like ChatGPT can do this now, and you'll reply, can it help me play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam?
Yeah, that's right. Man, playing Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam right now. That's right.
And we use information superhighway a lot as well, because that was a term that was huge when we were growing up, but it's no longer used, and it's just so dated. It's like surfing the web, which I love, exactly. which we'll often use as well. You say like, "What have you been up to?" And you're just like, "Man, I was just surfing the web all day." And then I'll say, "You mean you spent 3 hours on TikTok?"
Yeah, just surfing.
I'm just surfing the web.
But it is fun to watch as well, as I found this morning, because it has, in addition to all these people who've gone on to have these amazing careers, it's got little cultural references that are very of its time. So the TV will be on in a lot of scenes in the background. But
sorry, John, and also you might want to mention as well, when the TV is always on, the TV, there's this kind of common theme throughout the film, which is the trial, which is Ben Stiller plays the suspect.
That's right, and it's clearly inspired by the Menendez brothers trial, because it's these two twin brothers, and one of them is supposed to have killed the other. And I think that, it's hinted that they were previously sort of beloved celebrities, and then they went into weird lifestyles or whatever. But yeah, hilariously, Ben Stiller plays both of these brothers. And then as it progresses, you get one of them will be watching TV, and there'll be an ad for the TV movie, which is about the trial that's going on. And it's Eric Roberts as himself, just like playing both of these brothers. And it's called like Brother Sweet Brother or something stupid. and which is another kind of classic, became a kind of thing that it's a bit reminded me of stuff in Zoolander, where you see him like in stupid ads and things like that. But
you're saying the TV is on all the time.
But you'll also get kind of ads with you'll get like a Tony Robbins ad, and in one scene Matthew Broderick is about to call the number to get Tony Robbins's revival self-help trial, and then there'll be Ren and Stimpy on in another scene, like there's Jim Carrey's laughing watching Ren and Stimpy. So it's very kind of 90s television vibes, as well as this references to older television like My Three Sons. It's like some of the fake names that Jim Carrey uses are based on sort of obscure television shows from the 70s and 80s and earlier.
I thought I've got a few of my favorite scenes here, John, which it's crazy these all come from the same film, because again I reference these quite a lot. So one of the most famous scenes, which became I believe this then became a single that you could buy and was in the charts, is like Jim Carrey's I think it's him singing. He certainly in the film he lip syncs and pretends it's him singing, because he hosts this karaoke party for Matthew Broderick to like continue to ingratiate himself in his life. He like gives him this really expensive home stereo system, again very of its time, and it comes with a karaoke machine. With what is it called, like Lucasfilm THC cinema, so with bass so deep it's gonna make you cream in your pants, I think he says something like that.
It would make George Lucas cream in his pants.
That's right. and then in the karaoke scene he sings Jefferson Airplane's Somebody to Love.
Don't you
want somebody to love, and it's a great scene because the scene is used to, you know, Jim Carrey's, Matthew Broderick's hosting this party at Jim Carrey's. Jim Carrey's kind of hosting a party at Matthew Broderick's house, and it's all these weirdos that are like preferred customers of Jim Carrey who's brought to the party. And then he kind of sets it up that that Matthew Broderick's character has a romantic dalliance with this very beautiful woman, and as that is going on in a kind of bedroom, and it's all like drunk and hazy, it's a very good expression of what a party like that would be like, where everyone's kind of somebody's a bit stoned and it's a bit woozy and drunk and everyone's drinking, and then somebody goes into a dark bedroom and has a bit of a pash, and then as that's going all on, and it's just Jim Carrey singing Somebody to Love in this sort of weird register.
Like heavy vibrato.
Right. Don't you want somebody to love? You better find somebody to love.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's as Matthew Broderick's character is going to bed with this woman who Jim sort of encourages him to talk to at the party, and it turns out she's a sex worker that Jim's just like bought Matthew Broderick for the evening, which he kind of casually mentions the next day, and Matthew Broderick just loses his mind.
So good. I love that
bit. It was on me, pal. And he's like, what do you mean it was on you?
That one was on me. You'll get the next one. He goes, what? What do you mean it was on you? You know, I got that one. You'll get the next one. So good. So good.
Yeah. So that's right. So the soundtrack actually had that song on it. Unsurprisingly, sung by Jim Carrey. So it wouldn't surprise me.
And you said also Silverchair is on the soundtrack?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things I was reading about is that, I mean, and one of the things that also makes it, I think, the most culturally important film maybe ever is that it was is that Ben Stiller and Judd Apatow were really interested in making a soundtrack that was grunge based, which doesn't sound that interesting now, but of course it was 1995 when they were shooting it, and that was kind of a new thing to do. And Judd said in the interview nobody had really done that, and Ben was like, why don't we just make the soundtrack very grungy? And he said like it was kind of funny because by the time they actually released the film, people were kind of getting a bit sick of grunge, so it seemed a bit passé. 96
totally.
Yeah. But it was a kind of, the last the swan song of grunge. So they had, as well as Jim Carrey on the soundtrack, you've got Jerry Cantwell from Alice in Chains.
Wow.
You've got Filter, who've got that great song.
Yeah.
And you've got Cracker, you've got Porno for Pyros, Primitive Radio Gods, I don't know who they are. And you've got, I think one of these is the name that was being used at the time, like a kind of pen name for one of the guys from Pearl Jam who apparently made a song for the film. So one of the songs on the soundtrack is from him. So like a real lineup of grunge, as well as the song "Blind" by Silverchair, which is the fourth track on the album. So I was reading this interview with Judd Apatow, and he says like, yeah, we had, this and that and Silverchair. I was like, fuck, I don't remember Silverchair being on there. But there you go. Daniel Johns.
Take a bow.
Ben Gillies, take a bow. Exactly.
Daniel Johns, take an emaciated bow for your work in Cable Guy. The other scene, John.
Take a deranged shut-in bow.
The The other scenes that I love, there's two others that I'll mention. The dream scene / nightmare scene of Matthew Broderick is another one that I will often just quote to you, because all you have to say is this kind of frenetic expression of the words cable guy. Right. And you know exactly what I'm... Cable guy? Knock, 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 knock. Cable guy. And I think it's a really accurate depiction of a sort of fever dream nightmare where it's this kind of, it's this not quite reality of something happening and you're terrified and Jim Carrey's trying to come through the door of Matthew Broderick's apartment. Matthew Broderick's already started to become very terrified, reeling that there's something deeply wrong with Chip. And then he has this nightmare where the cable guy's trying to like break into his apartment, and Jim Carrey's character, they give him like contact lenses so his eyes are all sort of piercing blue, I think. Almost these like translucent retinas, and then a translucent iris,
and then black corridor.
Yeah, and looking through the fisheye lens of the peephole of the door, which also gives it this woozy, dreamlike effect. And then he's cable, like just knocking, going, cable guy. This sort of like, it's like
true.
Not quite normal human speech, just repeating the same lines.
Yeah.
I've always loved that.
Same when I watched it this morning. That is a real. There were just subtle things that they did with the sound and the visuals that made me think that is kind of a pretty good portrayal of a sort of unsettling dream.
Yeah.
And it's impressive. Of course, the other great scene is the medieval times.
That's the one. I think that's the most memorable. I think if you were to say to people, can you name a scene from The Cable Guy? I think a lot of people would say, oh yeah, that fucking medieval. Maybe, so tell everybody, John, what happens in the medieval time? Why are they at medieval times? What happens at medieval times?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of when they're in the slightly in between the sort of initial harmless part of their friendship and the scenes where Matthew Broderick is kind of getting uncomfortable and trying to distance himself. Jim Carrey takes him to this restaurant that Jim apparently is a big fan of because, Matthew's down about Leslie Mann still not wanting to get back with him or whatever. So they go to this restaurant.
Yeah, I was just going to say the restaurant Medieval Times, which I'm not looking this up. I assume it's real because we also name checked Medieval Times in the Big Bang Theory episode because Jim Parsons, or maybe not, maybe I sent it to you actually after we talked about the Big Bang. Maybe it's not in the episode, but Jim Parsons from Big Bang Theory is then in Garden State, and in Garden State, his character is a knight at medieval times.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Unless they just decided to also, unless they called Judd and said, can we also have a character in this fictitious restaurant that you made in The Cable Guy?
In the same, for some reason, Garden State and Cable Guy are in the same universe.
But just for that one, just so that one thing, go on.
Says here, Medieval Times Dinner and Tournament is an American dinner theatre featuring staged medieval games, etc., etc. So it is real.
It is real, yeah. So go on. So he takes him there.
Takes him there and says, I come here twice a week, whatever. and Matthew Broderick's kind of awkwardly trying to work up to the speech where he's sort of going to tell him like, look, you're a good guy, but I don't want to be friends. But he keeps kind of interrupting him. And then Janine Garofalo plays this typical sort of jaded Gen X waiter who's forced to speak in kind of medieval patter, like me lord, and she's kind of really.
And Jim Carrey is sort of in full character, so he makes her, and you can just see her rolling her eyes, and Jim Carrey's just clearly being this total like nerd, going, "Hast thou, my lady?"
Exactly. That's right. Hast thou, wench, got a tankard of mead for me and my fine fellow? And she's just like,
I've been out all day and I have worked up a king's thirst.
Yeah, that's right. And then Andy Dick comes out, and he's the guy who's kind of running the Medieval Times, like he's the kind of head of the actors and the MC. And so he's kind of saying, "Welcome to Medieval Times," and then
right.
And then we
do that quite a lot as well. We go, "Welcome to Medieval Times."
Yeah, he delivers that line really well. And then they pause the action because Jim apparently has given a bunch of these people, made them preferred customers and given them free cable and whatever. And so they've agreed to let Matthew Broderick and Jim have a kind of fight with the weapons. And of course, And it's a really well shot scene because there's again through that scene there's various references to film. Like Jim kind of gets into this strange state where he seems to think it's Star Trek and it's Captain Picard and Spock forced to fight, and they play the music from that scene in Star Trek, and then it culminates in Matthew Broderick and Jim Carrey being on horses with jousting sticks, and Andy Dick's kind of going like, "Get on the horse, buddy. I don't think he's kidding." and then Jim Carrey eventually gets knocked off by Matthew Broderick. But yeah, that's a great scene. It's also it's a great early example of those sort of that kind of basis of comedy being, which is a bit of something that's kind of evolved to something like, so you think you should, or what is it? So I think you should leave, not so you think you can dance.
Yeah.
I think you should leave, where it's like someone gets into a situation and just takes it completely the wrong way and makes everyone else really uncomfortable. Like that's several scenes in the movie. We've talked about the kind of porno board game that they're playing, but there's also like the basketball. Just somebody approaches things, as Jim Carrey's character always does, with a level of intensity that like everyone else finds really awful, and it's hilarious. But that's true. Those two scenes plus the one with the rain coming down on the satellite dish, which is a pretty memorable image.
Maybe we should also mention that, which is that the very final scene is kind of the darkest, where he has Jim Carrey, after sort of manipulating Matthew Broderick's life. Matthew Broderick character does not want to be friends with Jim Carrey anymore, the cable guy, and he does not take that well, so he's like becomes vengeful that he doesn't want to become his friend, and so it sort of culminates in him eventually kidnapping Matthew Broderick's sort of on again, off again girlfriend, Leslie Mann, and taking her out to the satellite dish and giving her the future is now speech. But and then eventually this I must admit, I did find this one decision that they chose a little bit tonally off, which is he's tied her up and hung her from the satellite dish at the end. Do you remember this? And I was kind of like, this, if you just didn't have her tied up and hanging from the set, like it's a bit Batman villain-esque now. And it doesn't like, how did he even tie her up and get her up there? Like the logistics are all off. This is just not like, why would he do that? This doesn't really make any sense. But and then Matthew Broderick has worked out that he's taken her to the satellite dish, and so he drives up, and then they have a fight on the satellite dish.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't even mentioned that Jim Carrey's character has a lisp throughout the film. Right. And then Matthew Broderick punches him in the mouth and knocks the lisp out of him, and then punches him again, and it goes back to being a lisp.
But yeah, it's a very memorable scene because it's a rainy night and they're on this huge satellite dish with rainwater pooling in the middle of it. And I thought, I had forgotten, spoiler alert for anyone who's holding on to the plot after 30 years. I had remembered Jim Carrey's character dying, but he doesn't die. It seems like he's going to, because he falls onto the sort of middle of the satellite dish, and it's kind of this funny moment because everyone's waiting for the verdict in this trial that has these two twins involved, both played by Ben Stiller. And he lands on the satellite dish and knocks out everyone's cable just at the pivotal moment where the jury's about to read out the verdict.
That's great. That's great, that bit, actually.
And then Jim Carrey, it's revealed, is still alive, albeit injured, and he gets taken away in a chopper by, paramedics. And then one of the paramedics says something, friendly to him just to be nice, and he sort of takes it to heart, and it's implied that he's about to start stalking this paramedic. His next victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's dark. It's great. John, we could Cable Guy and Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam forever. But I would say to everybody, you should check out the Cable Guy again. I have been doing a bit of a 90s, early 2000s movie rewatch binge recently. And actually, I think I'm going to watch Reality Bites is going to be next one on my list.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Me and John, we're just gonna the podcast is just gonna become like film links where we talk about one film and then we link it to another film, and then that's the next film that we
And they
talk
all-
about.
They
So
all
what's
just
going to
happen to be directed by Ben Stiller.
We could just go through Ben Stiller's
Next week,
directorial.
Tropic Thunder. Yeah.
We're going to
Yeah.
I'm going to watch Reality Bites, and then after that, we're going to go Winona Ryder, Beetlejuice, and then we're going to go Gina Davis, A League of Their Own.
Man, that I do want to kind of watch that now.
I know my daughter ain't so pretty as some of these other girls. What's another quote? Just another full of quotes. I love
Exactly.
League of Their Own.
And then Field
Please,
of
Mr.
Dreams.
Arnold.
We'll go to Field of Dreams.
Field of
That's a
Dreams.
classic. One of the few movies that will make my father cry. But
That's cute.
so I would say to people, try and de-integrate your television, phone, and computer. Put your phone down and just turn on the Cable Guy. It's available on YouTube. I think I rented it for about $4 Australian.
Cool.
And you'll feel like you're getting your favorite movie beamed into your home at the exact time you want it, which is exactly the kind of thing that would have pushed Chip's buttons back in the day. And you can just enjoy those easy living, post-Cold War, pre-9/11 vibes.
Yes.
Where the people were so safe and bored that they just fantasized about threatening cable men.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody, and we can't wait to see you next week.
Podcast.